All right, Gary, good to have you back on the show, man. It's been a while. How's things?
Yeah, things are great. It's been a long time. I think I was one of the first people on your show.
You were, yeah, back in 2021, man. But God, time flies. Time flies, brother. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on today. And one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you was for a catch up, but also on November 14th will be the 20th anniversary of the Nimitz Encounter. And I thought it'd be really good for a lot of folk out there who may be new to the subject and who are subscribing to kind of lay out some of the information again for them. So I'm sorry I'm putting you through it again, but I really appreciate it.
Well, the story doesn't change, so that's one positive thing about it. And it was a historic moment in the disclosure process. So it's sort of important that people remember.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So, first of all, could you just remind us what your role was on board the USS Princeton back in 2004?
So at that time, I was a E4 fire controlman, and I ran the computer, Aegis Computer operating. I was Navy's computer technician in the Navy, and what they were responsible for, like when you're looking at all these videos about them looking at the sweeps and combat and stuff like that, the consoles that all run that stuff, and the Spy One Bravo is part of the Aegis system. So all the computers that run all that, those are all my babies. So I was basically operated all the equipment that they were using to track these unknown aircraft.
And was the Spy One, was that quite new at the time for the kind of technology that was available?
It had been recently upgraded before our last deployment, but it wasn't a new thing. It had been, it was tried and true. So I mean, it'd been around for quite a bit. I think our baseline was 6.1. So ours was the 6.1 version. So it had already been through a ton of other versions, for years prior to us.
Nice. So you were off the coast of California on workups, pre-deployment, doing all of these kind of tests or whatever. And tell us what first happened and what was seen and by whom.
Well, I can just tell it from my perspective, because a lot of the other guys, they're different stations, different jobs, so they got different perspectives on things. And I remember I'd woke up and I'd had a late watch. We had the midnight 4 watch, so that means I got to sleep in the morning. Well, I got pulled out early because I was the only computer technician at the time. That was a very common theme of me. It's like, hey, you got to get up. We need a reset of this computer, or we need this, or we need to do that. And being the only tech, you basically just you get a little bit of leeway where if you're sleeping in your space, they're not going to bust your chops. But so I get up, like get some clothes on, grab some coffee, go up to the smoke deck. Smoke deck on a ship is just basically whatever designated area at the time it is that we can have cigarettes. And I was still an avid smoker at the time. And First thing I did, and everybody on the board will laugh. I went and bummed a cigarette off somebody because I didn't have any. That might have been a common theme, but so I was talking with one of the guys that specifically just work on physically the spy system, and he said, did you hear about the tracks that we've been tracking? And I'm like, what? And he goes, oh, there's these weird tracks that just floating out there, just no IFF, anything. And then I go, was it just clutter? And he goes, no, but I think they're gonna make us do. Basically, we were bitching about the work we were going to have to do because we didn't really know what it was at the time. Because I already know they're going to make me take the computers down, run system checks, and all this stuff. And sure enough, we did have to do all that, but everything checked out fine. Everything was beautiful, and then it started to become kind of a thing because these things they disappear for a while and then they just reappear on our scopes. Now, understand that we have a 256 nautical mile range around the boat that we able to track. After that, we might get a couple more kilometers or a couple more miles outside of that, but not much more. It's basically as soon as the curvature of the Earth hits, that's it. We can't track further than the curvature of the Earth, which is still pretty amazing. But we can track up really, really, really far to a undesignated height. that's uh, that's actually classified as is how far up we can track, but it's pretty far. Um, I'm sure Elon's satellites can be tracked with a spy. So if that gives you an idea of, and it actually will go further than that. The actual number is the only thing that's actually classified, or the way we can manipulate the radar. Sometimes the specific frequencies that the radar uses, and those things are all classified. But I don't have to. Luckily, that doesn't really affect the story much. Um, so I went up to combat, and first time I looked at it, it was no big deal. It was just three little blips. They didn't have IFF. They were only going like 100 knots. So I remember thinking to myself, like what the hell flies at 100 knots? And we were just joking around, as a balsa wood flyers, somebody's out there with some type of balsa wood aircraft or some glider of some type just hanging out there. But even a glider would, you know, go more than 100. Well, not really. 100 knots still fast for a glider, but even a Cessna and stuff like that, they'd all be flying a lot faster. So we went to, uh, didn't say anything. Honestly, you didn't hear anything from the chain of command about it either. It was just kind of a hobby at this point, just to pop up into combat and see if we're still tracking them. Sure enough, for like almost a week, and then I started getting the idea, well, maybe I could see them. I mean, they were pretty far away, but whenever we got close enough to them, because we were doing like a box in the Pacific. So, so it's like, well, worst case scenario, I can't see them. No big deal. So you're not really supposed to go out in the bridge wing when you were in transit, but things happen. You're on a boat for long enough, you tend to know people. And ironically, Cahill, whenever he was on duty, I never went near the bridge. Yeah, we had a lot of history at that point, and I didn't really like him. Yeah, but then again, if somebody arrests you, you don't really have a soft spot in your heart for him. Plus, he was a hard nut. He was all about being by the book. He wasn't going to play games. He wasn't going to be the guy that let me out on a bridge wing and have me freaking end up flying off the side of it without being harnessed. you know, so more power to him. But either way, best time I usually get up there is when he wasn't on the bridge, and when the people that were, like twilight or even midnight was even great too. So anytime, because I tried looking at it during the day, and you couldn't see it during the day at all. So, and I mean, kind of, but you couldn't tell whether it was a boat, like a fishing boat off the horizon, or nothing. And so even at night, sometimes you'd see the light, and it would be at the right bearing and right range and right elevation, but you didn't know if it was what you were looking at. But then at some point, all of a sudden, you'd see the light, and it would just zip off, or it would zip one way or another, but it would move in a way that, like, it would take you a second to realize that it moved, because it was a very consistent acceleration. It wasn't like and it was so fast, the acceleration was so fast, and the speed was at a consistent rate, it almost looked like it was just instantaneously moving at a certain speed. It's like if like you get in your car and just say 60 miles an hour, and then you started going 60 from point one. That's how it looked, which messes with your brain, and I just didn't see very well. So that's when I knew, it's like, all right, this is, I know what they are. you know but I don't know what they are. I know that they're not, you know and we're not looking at crafts. And then when they disappear, I'd go up to a combat and ask him, are we still tracking them? He goes, no, they left the scope, because they moved faster than we could track at the time. So to us, they would be there, maybe one more blip, and then they were gone.
Wow. Just completely disappeared.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, the spy can track something very, very, very fast. I mean, hypersonic plus. I mean, there's like Mach. I wouldn't even really know how fast it could get, because it's all about how fast we can be, we can make the rotation, and it's all beams. So it's not like there's a physical object moving. So it's a matter of just firing off these beams faster. And that's all we're very capable of doing that. And it's a very fast radar when it comes to tracking things. And matter of fact, ironically, going through school for those systems, we used to call the spy radar the alien technology because of how here's this one radar that can be a navigational radar, it can be a fire control radar, it can be a you could do anything with it, but it doesn't move. It's just these plates on the side, and it's just made up of like hundreds of feed horns on each one that all move independently, that each one of those feed horns can control a track. So I mean, wherever the thing is in front of you. So I mean, it's an amazing system, and we used to call it alien technology because our limited capacity for understanding advanced technology until and I really didn't. I think it was just fun to try to see them zoom off at first, and then it really didn't hit home until I watched the clip that was on the secret land. So I got like the first day that it happened, I got up and I was out smoking, and one of the other guys is like, "Hey, did you see the video of the intercept?" I go, "There was an intercept?" Because I mean that's how much we're even being told. I mean, as junior personnel, you don't get told nothing. Um,
Well, just a second. Before we come to the intercept, I just have a couple of questions about, do the blips look any different depending on what type of aircraft it is or object in the sky, or is it just the way it maneuvers?
Well, the profiles, like the guys that run the radar, they could tell you what the profile of it is and stuff like that. They're going to be able to tell you a little bit more about it. I wasn't an expert at reading the radar itself. I could see the track. If there was a label on the track, I could tell you what the label meant, that type of stuff. But as for like size, range, bearing, stuff like that, they would be able to determine that through their expertise. Like OS is like senior chief. Uh, he would have been able to look at it and tell you whether it was a large object, short object, big object, and that's going to be in the details of it. The small little screen, it's just a digital triangle. It's not going to give you, then the metadata would tell you all that information. Um, so it's not. Yeah, you guys remember this is a digital screen too. This isn't like the old days where you see the old phosphorus thing and it's going bleep bleep. It's not doing that anymore. And they're not little like like even in the '80s movies and stuff when you saw the flight radars on the control towers when like in Die Hard. They don't look like that anymore. They're basically computer screens, and each track will be like a triangle, or they would be some type of a digital thing like that. So they they would just have metadata attached to them, so you could click on the track and get all that data for you, and it'd tell you its profile and things like that. And um, so yes, you can determine that information. I couldn't determine that information. Um, I'm just following you like what my day in day outs were during this entire thing. Um,
No, that's really good. It's good to get a picture of that for sure.
yeah. So finally, I get up to the secret of space where I was watching the video, and I saw the original video, and I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, is this what I think it is? And then I'm looking up at the guy that's like all excited, and the guy that's showing it to me, he's like, he's waiting to see my reaction to this thing, and I'm like, is this what I think it is? He goes, mm-hmm. And I go, what are they doing? He goes, they're doing nothing. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, have we, and then after that, it gets kind of blurry. I don't really remember much about what happened because it wasn't exciting anymore. It wasn't like I had something to look forward to. Then it was back to business. But I remember I ran to my space because back in you remember those old iOmega zip disks that were the 100 megabyte ones that had little crystals in
Absolutely.
them and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went and grabbed one of those because the secret land, I was going to copy the damn thing before. Now I watched it through twice before I ran to go get my disc, and it was gone by the time I got back. They had erased it off the secret side. And
Who
then,
will have erased it?
well, it would have been somebody that ran the system. It would have been some system administrator or something of that
And would
nature.
they been ordered to do that by someone higher up?
Most likely somebody realized it was on there and realized that, junior personnel that have access, because having basically, as long as you had a secret clearance, you could watch anything off the secret side if somebody pulls it up for you. And as long as you were just presented it, it wasn't necessarily an issue for anybody to see it. It's not like, but there are a lot of exceptions, so better than to go like in CES, which is it's a secret space that does all the incoming and outcoming signals that come from the ship are going through that space. It's super secret. Matter of fact, they got to put like coverings over all the screens and stuff if they have non-authorized personnel in there. I mean, that's how secret that space is. You know, that's actually where uh, Jason watched the video, and Camarazell, which had come out later on, he actually worked in that space. So he actually saw all the classified intel coming in and out. So if you ever, I mean, his interview is one that, knowing Camarazell as long as I did while on board, he was never been one for. He was a pain in the ass because he was just always very so specific about everything. He was one of those OCD people, like a Sheldon type of person. He was just super smart, socially not kind of awkward, but always was one of the smartest guys in the room if you were standing in a room full of guys. So he was always a straight shooter with everything. So when he came forward, I was really happy because it's his testimony and what he can say. You could take it to heart. You can actually see his interview on Dave Beatty's website on his YouTube channel for the Nimitz Encounter, and I really encourage, if anybody hasn't seen that documentary. That documentary gives me chills every single time because it's so dead on. But yeah, so by the time I got back, stuck the disc in there, go to click on it, no file found. Like, the fuck. So I go down to MySpace and I log in under my own credentials, thinking maybe I could just do a search for it. Like maybe they moved it to a different location. Nope, just gone. And then I get an email, mm, after we hit port, and it had that compressed version that you saw, that the entire world got to see. That was a compressed version of the original, and it got the good stuff. It got the meat of it, but there's still some other things that happen in the video, and there's one thing that I will never explain because it's my only method for validating whether somebody else has seen the full length video or not. And it has nothing to do with how the ship moved. So it has mostly to do about with what the ship looks like at all times, and that's the only thing I keep to myself, and I will keep that to myself until probably my deathbed. But I will eventually someday tell people what it is. But it's my only way to validate whether somebody's seen the entire video or not. So, and some, yeah. So most of the people I see have actually only seen the shorter clips of them. There seems to be a couple of different clips that were floating around, and nobody's seen. I mean, I know for a fact the people that were with me that saw it. So I know there is a handful of people that have seen the full 10 minutes, and of course, Jason. He accidentally tipped on exactly what I was thinking about, and he never. I don't think he's really talked about exactly what it is because he overlooked it too. So, but then as we discussed it later, I kind of roundabout asked him specific questions to see if I could get him to talk about the thing that I wanted to validate, and he did. And then I said, "Don't ever talk about that part ever again. That's the only way we can know that other people have seen it." And he's like, "Good idea."
Can I ask, with all the analysis and citizen analysis we see on Twitter all the time regarding that video, if the version that you're talking about here was to come to light, would it show instantly that this is definitely something anomalous?
Yeah, even that. See, the problem with the whole citizen recount of it is that I could take anything out of context and turn it into whatever I want. I mean, just look at the Bible, look at any religious text, look at, humans' imaginations are unlimited in their capacity. So when you're trying to figure out something, you're using your imagination because you're trying to imagine how these things could work. If people looked at it and looked at it what it is with a context from a mind frame, like a military mind frame of looking at exactly what you're seeing, they're going to see a craft with no flight surfaces except for two little prongs at the bottom that has a universal heat pattern, meaning that there's no hot spots for engines. Or when you look at the thermal image of like a jet going hypersonic, you're going to see points where the wings are hot, where the engines are hot, any place that's causing tremendous amounts of friction, like the nose, you know, all those places that are breaking through air, they're going to be warm. They're going to be warmer than the rest of the plane. And then you'll see the heat distribute throughout the entire airframe because that's exactly how they're designed. This thing kept at a universal temperature that was actually cooler than the air around it. Yeah, it didn't matter whether that thing was flying 10 miles an hour or 30. It didn't have an engine that was apparent. It didn't have wings. It didn't have propellers. What was it? Fucking magic? No, excuse my language. What was it? Magic? Well, last time I checked, magic didn't exist either. But uh, this is it was an amazing piece of technology. And I've had people say, well, what if it was, like an illusion, some type of, some type of advanced, like blue beam style, hologram. And I go, if it was, it can reflect radar, which is amazing in itself. If some type of illusion or some type of hologram, it would have been more advanced than anything anybody's ever thought of right now. I mean, the amount of technology that would be behind it would be just as impressive as what it was a hologram of. So whether it was a solid ship, which I'm in the belief of, because I don't understand, like it would have to have been a solid hologram. It wouldn't have reflected radar if it wasn't. Our planes, our pilots wouldn't have been able to see it. I mean, it was we have too much evidence saying that it was a physical object to say that it was a hologram, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and surely if it was a hologram that it's being beamed from somewhere, and if you've got this 250 nautical mile radar, you'd have picked up maybe where it was coming from, you'd think.
Well, either that, or I mean, the source would have had to have been coming from space. It would have had to come from a satellite, because I mean, ground based, it would have been disrupted by the atmosphere. And I mean, so the only real logical, I mean, to me, I mean, you gotta remember, this is all me speculating. This is me. So if there was islands and land based places where it technically could have been launched from, but the only place that you would have been able to launch a hologram, being able to move in the trajectories and the way that it moved, so that no matter where you looked, you could still see it. Like even if you went around it or above it, it would have had to been from space. I mean, and that's my opinion. And so if it was a hologram, it was being beamed from space, which there's all kinds of other problems. It just starts to a whole can of worms. I've actually completely dismissed that in my mind. But anybody that comes up with a somewhat rational theory, I don't mind throwing a couple brain cells together to see, if that matches what we saw that day. And so far, the only thing that matches is a piece of hardware technology that was being either remotely piloted or piloted, and it had sentience. It was reacting to our pilots and our well, and honestly, it was just doing its own thing prior to that. So I mean, until we intercepted it, it didn't give a shit about us. So that was the other thing that people have to remember is so for 7 days, it wasn't like flying near us or checking us out. It was doing its own flight path. And it was always the same flight path every time we'd see it, and we'd go back and forth. And the impression from looking at our current science and looking at what we do in places like Mars, Venus, what do? We send probes there that have specific purposes. I kind of think that if it's off-world tech, it was probably sent here, and it feels like it may have been AI driven technology. It would explain how it could, it could have been had been made of materials that we're not aware of how to construct yet that can withstand G forces that do those types of hairpin turns like it did. But if there's something biological inside, unless it was anti-gravity, it would probably be destroyed. So there's something to be said for if it's AI, then it would have a much higher tolerance. As long as they could keep everything intact, it could still work. And of course, there's the theory that it had some type of plasma around it, or a warp bubble of some type, or some type of space time bubble. And those are all valid theories and stuff like that. And honestly, I kind of lean towards that, anyways. But I still believe that they were AI driven. I think they had a certain specific purpose, and they were just doing their job, whatever it was gleamed to do. And then when we interfered with that, it just reacted and then went back to business as usual.
Right. Yeah. Did you get debriefed at all? Because it seems like, everything happened, and the next day it seems like all the ships saw the video like it wasn't a big deal. But did it get serious at all?
Well, for me, the only process that I was a privy to was when we had a helicopter come in, and I was told to, so we have one machine that does all the data recording for Aegis and CEC and all that stuff, and CEC actually has its own separate data.
What is CEC?
That was a brand spanking new. We were the very first battle group to deploy it, but it was called the Cooperative Engagement Capability System. Now in the current baselines, it's literally just it's just a part of the Aegis system. But at this point, this was a new tech, and what it does is it takes all the ships within the battle group, and it merges all their sensor data into one picture, and that's mostly for line of sight firing. So say we're in a conflict around an island, or we're in the Straits of Vermouth, and there's other ships that are in other areas, and they run out of missiles. They need us to fire for them. We can now use their fire solution because they can see it clear as day, but we can't see it at all. And as long as we're within range, we can use their fire solution and fire our missiles non-line of sight. But on top of that, it also gives us a very detailed version of the battlefield. When you have, 5 different sets of sensors, including sonar, radar, Hawkeye, up in the atmosphere, and they're all merging that data into one picture, it shows you an extremely sharp idea what's going on. And I think that's the reason why they reset CEC, because that would have had that sharp picture of all this stuff going on enclosed within the data set, and that can be remotely accessed. So I'm assuming that they probably uploaded all that information and then just dumped our system, because we had to reset the entire CEC system. And then, but with my tapes, that's a hardwired system. It's not connected to a network. So they asked me to bring them any tapes that had any data on them from the 7 days, which I had meticulously kept them because I knew somebody was coming for it at some point. Well, I mean, we had a crash a year. I think it was a helicopter crash or a plane crash. A air vehicle crashed about a year before that, and it was a big to do. And they came on board and they wanted all the data from the crash too. So I knew the process already. Wrapping my gums. I'm getting old, so I get dry mouth. So the they had me take all the tapes, and I signed I did sign for them. They took it and they took it in the proper way. It wasn't even like PJs where they're just like, "Shut up, just give it to them." This was, I was told by I think it was Master Chief Kirby. He was in charge of the CF divisions in total, which were all the fire control divisions. And just he goes, "Give them the tapes." All right. And he signed the custody form. Here you go. I have no idea. They had plainclothes people. They, khakis and polo types. Kind of. I assumed at the time probably tech reps, but then they wouldn't like. I knew all the Aegis tech reps from when we were in the yards, so I knew every tech rep for every system. And the one thing that kind of threw me off with these guys is they wouldn't really look at me. They didn't make eye contact. They were there for a purpose, and I wasn't it. And then the only time one of them looked at me, he goes, "And then now I need you to go upstairs, and even if the tape is brand new, I need you to erase all of your other tapes." And he goes, "I want every tape in your shop to have the same exact date."
Just so it's been done properly and consistently.
Yeah, yeah. So they want to make sure that I didn't like basically keep two tapes and something like that. So then, sure enough, the next day I did have an inspection of my space, so they were probably looking for that. And
That's crazy. That's a lot of detailed kind of focus.
yeah, that's the last of the wild ride until we were in transit heading to Puerto Vallarta. I think after that, uh, and we are going to have a couple of days of liberty in Puerto Vallarta, so we were all looking for that. And then we, what UFO, whatever. We're going to sit on a beach and drink, you know. But I did hear the official announcement for it was that they were spontaneously forming ice in the atmosphere. And when my chief looked at me and said that, and I go, "So you're trying to tell me I'm supposed to believe that these objects that were moving in a horizontal and lateral movements at past Mach 25 were ice?" And I'm like, "I need to get me some of that ice." and my chief just started getting pissed. He goes, "Shut the fuck up, Voorhis." And I'm like, hmm. And I just got, and then from that day on, I just kept getting more and more disgruntled. And ironically, when we came back from that, that was pretty much my last cruise. Because they were trying to get me to reenlist, and I was like, "Nope, I'm done, done. I'm not gonna. It wasn't directly from this encounter. It was just I had been becoming more and more increasingly disgruntled because of trying to make rank, trying to, I mean, getting like passing my exams by high amounts, but not getting my rank. So you get what's called pass but not advanced. So you get like a 80, 90 on your advancement test, and then you get nothing, but you get what they call P&A, pass but not advanced points, and you have to get so many points and get a high growth score, and then you might make the 1% that's getting advanced. So I was like, "No, it's time to leave. I'm done." And I'm glad I did. Well, everything worked out so much better after I left anyways. So it's some hard times and some great times, but at the end I regret nothing. And yeah, it was probably one of the most unique things that had ever happened to me. And I never talked about it again until Chief contacted me years and years later about the New York Times article, and you know it was just a drunken story that I'd tell the people I trust at a certain point, because I didn't really want to tell anybody that I didn't trust. But just like I am with people that tell me about their stories. Somebody wants to tell me about a blue avian that they once dated. I'm less like, cool story, bro. I believe you believe that, but unless I can meet her, I don't believe you. you know, and I'm not making fun of them or anything like that. It's just it's just like with Greer. I'm like, next time you're in Florida, hit me up, show me what you're about, and I'll be your biggest endorsement if you can prove what you're talking about. Set up a meeting. You're talking about talking with aliens. I want to talk with aliens. Come on, hook it up. I know how to meditate. I'll even leave my gun at home.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned there Kevin Day, and now Kevin's adamant that he saw these things on the radar sort of disappearing around Guadalupe Island and disappearing into the ocean. How much of that do you kind of subscribe to?
Um, I know for a fact they were dropping off around there, Baja, Guadalupe Island, that area. I don't know. I don't have the expertise to say whether we could determine whether they drop into the ocean at that range. Because falling off the map's falling off the map. So if you know, I'm just going to have to. I couldn't vouch for it or not. I would just rely on his expertise at that point. If he says that they were dropping into the ocean, then I'm just kind of uh, stuck assuming that that's what happened. Um, I didn't personally see that, but then I only ever saw more than 3 or 4 tracks at a time. So but different times, different places. He could have seen something different because he was in combat a whole lot more than me. So
No, that makes sense. Absolutely. You gotta respect the difference there. No, I appreciate that. What about this submarine, because obviously there's the Fravor encounter, he'd seen what looked like something the size of a 737, I think he may have said, under the water. And, there was a sub in the fleet. And was there sonar? I think you've mentioned this before in interviews. So if you could just clarify that part of it.
so during my original thing, because like at the time I was told that there was a track and something was that the thing was doing like 500 knots underwater. Now that's actually something I was actually told by a junior personnel at the time of the event. So
And
that's
that was
why it was
someone who
part of my.
worked on the sonar, right?
Well, they were a sonarman, but that was something that I was told at the time of the event. I didn't know where he got the information or anything like that. So when then I got somebody that was actually in charge of the sonar reached out to me after that interview and said that's not what happened. That couldn't have happened. We didn't have the tail in the water. Now, for those that don't understand the sonar, what the tail is it's a literal tail of sonar buoys that drag behind the ship that allow them to triangulate objects under the water. So that's how they would get an active, that when they go active, they have that tail in the water and they use it to actively triangulate and shoot out sonar so they like in a grid pattern so they know exactly where an object is. Now they didn't have that out. So then I'm like, all right, well that definitely couldn't have happened. So I went ahead and you know went back to Dave and I said, "Hey, look, man, I just talked to the guy that was literally in charge of it. That I actually I believe him wholeheartedly because he was a good friend of mine. He said that there was no way that the Princeton could have had an active track. Now, the submarine has claimed that they had 0 tracks, but they also have only given official statements. We don't have anybody off the sub. We have no whistleblowers off the sub. So all we have is the official. And if you've read the 2007 revised report, I'm going to tell you my opinion of that report was basically, hey, let's just ask somebody that was on board just to close this file up because I'm sick of dealing with this. That's what that report felt like. It's just like, yeah, this is garbage. This is nothing of this is real. This is all bullshit, you know. And I was pretty pissed off by that report. But the after digging, I finally found out that there were a set of sonarmen on board the Princeton that had to sign non-disclosure agreements because of something they heard. So there were no active tracks aboard the Princeton, but there was what they call a passive track. They heard what it sounded like. Now that could be in the air or in the water. From my impression from the person I talked to, is that it was in the air. And if you talk to any sonar guys, they can identify aircraft, they can identify boats on the surface, they can identify everything by what they sound, and they can even so it doesn't matter if it's a plane or not. The sound waves still hit the water, and they can still hear it. So you could have 30 planes up there, and until that noise starts drowning itself out, they can identify individual targets too. Not like not like a radar or something like that, but I mean, it's very, it's very similar principles. So, but they're just listening. They're just listening. So they actually heard what this thing sounded like. And that was apparently a big deal. So they must have already had tons of sonar tracks on, or they must have had tons of radar on these objects, but not as much on the sonar side or the acoustic side. So, and what the gentleman said to me is that he was using like a scale, like to try to tell me how faint this thing was, and he goes from like a U2, it sounds like a lawnmower. Like I mean, they said they're crazy loud. He goes through all these different things. And he goes, look, the quietest thing we generally track is a nuclear sub. This made a nuclear sub sound like a college football game. So I mean, they almost didn't even like keep it until somebody came running in saying, "Hey, did you get it?" Meaning, did you get the sound of this thing going by? They were literally going to probably just toss the information because it didn't sound like anything. It's so faint that it was so low that they just didn't, you know, they weren't, they almost missed it. Yeah, so that was the big underwater deal, at least according to the Princeton. As for the sub, I've got zero idea about the sub. There was the only ships that I knew that were out with us were us, the carrier, and the sub. The other two boats were at the pier participating via. Uh, Basically, the CEC also allowed for simulations for the other ships. So basically, what it would do is it would take our three ships' data, me, us, the carrier, and the Nimitz, or the sub, the Nimitz, and us, and take that data and allow them to just display that data. They weren't adding to it, but they weren't subtracting to it. So they basically were participating via our data and would just react to it like it was theirs. And so they in that way they're literally able to participate in anything. Basically, the computer is simulating it, and they're just driving the ship like it was moving around with us. So that's a lot of the confusion about, well, what happened with the Chosen, or what happened with the other ships that were in the battle group. Yeah, they were moored. They didn't Nothing happened to them. They got to see the same tracks though. You got to remember, because I mean, CEC takes all the sensor data from all of everything and it combines it into a picture, so they could see the same tracks that we could see.
You see, that's really interesting that there is all of this data regarding the events that occurred around that time. But we hear from Arrow and the UAP task force that there's always like limited data that they've had access to, almost like it doesn't exist. And like, it doesn't make sense.
Well, I think it's a two-part problem though, because we're not sure who investigated it. We don't know what substrand of which branch of what office investigated it. Which office was looking for it. Was there multiple involved? We have no idea, because I mean, they said PJ said the guys were wearing Air Force uniforms. Our guys were civilians. You know, and the CEC over there on shore side, that's all civilian. Those are civilian contractors running most of that. So I mean, what companies have the data? Who had access to it? I mean, those are the real questions. I mean, you got to find that stuff out first. Dave Beatty had actually located where the video was and had FOIA requested it, and they basically said no. They basically, by saying no, we couldn't have the full footage. They admitted that there was a longer version, but because of national security, we couldn't have it.
Of course, of course. Same old story.
Until the story is a narrative that they need us to have, we're not going to have the information. That's why I'm rooting for guys like Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon. Those are amongst the people that I'm praying that they get what they want. And at this point, it kind of feels like they're just using a shotgun. They're not really they're just throwing anything they can at them at this point. But I pray for them to be able to get what the disclosure, but I honestly feel until we can academically reproduce the same level and caliber of data that the military has and study this phenomena on our own with no government intervention, that we'll never be able to force disclosure in any countries. And that if we do get a real disclosure, it'll come from somewhere like China or Russia or another country basically trying to make the US look like a patsy. Like, yeah, well, you don't even, you lie to your people. We're not lying. Look, this is what we got. By the way, we made 15 of these ships. F you. You know, I mean, it's. I guess I just saw a Twitter thing. I don't know how true it is. I just saw, in passing that I guess some leaked documents from China, but I've got leaked documents right here that I have never been able to verify. It's not. I talked to Chris Mellon about him, and he's like, no, no, just ignore that shit. That's stupid. That's all fake. So I'm like, all right, Roger that. And then it might have been something that I got mailed these things, and they looked relatively official, and it's just like, hey, Chris, what do you think about this? And so we squashed that pretty quick, but it's just been a big up and down with this whole thing. But the takeaways I want people to really remember about the Nimitz encounter is that the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Department of Defense, both admitted that this all happened the way that we said it happened. They have admitted in a 2015 with the encounters off the East Coast that these things happened. So there is reason to worry and wonder what these things are. Um, so that's a landmark move. That's never happened before. And I think the best that we are going to be able to get is that from the Nimitz encounter on, we'll be able to get data, but we will never be able to get true data from then back, because of liabilities of, I mean, look at all the stories we have of people just disappearing, or their lives being ruined, or committing suicide under odd circumstances, heart attacks and stuff like that. And I will go on the record as saying that I've had nobody contact me, nobody's told me not to talk about this. I've had no government agencies raid my house. I've had, because I said when we first started, I go, somebody knocks on my door and says, hey, not for nothing, but you're done. That's it, guys. I'm doing a podcast and we're just talking about crazy stuff. And no more scientifically looking into this stuff, and that's just nature of the beast. I'll go back to being just being a crazy podcaster instead.
No, absolutely, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you going through the story again. Like, that was some real good detail, things that I hadn't really heard in that kind of detail before. So I appreciate that. But let's move on. Obviously, post that incident, post 2017, you became involved in the UFO community more, and with UAPx. So tell us what's happening with UAPx these days.
Well, we're just a small group. There's only 8 of us, and so we have been just basically not really worrying about social media. We've been just nose to the grindstone. We're just, we're working behind the scenes, analyzing data. We had a big to do with trying to get a little bit of citizen science involved with analyzing the FLIR data, which unfortunately wasn't as high as quality as we really would have liked. Probably due to the nature of the limitations of the equipment that we had at the time. And
Sorry, which FLIR data was that? Just to clarify.
oh, that's a FLIR data from when UAPx went to California and Catalina Island, and so this was all FLIR data based off of we were looking towards Catalina Island, and it was, say, 7 FLIR cameras that we had set up and across the horizon to look over that channel, and it wasn't as detailed. Like I would, we're working on systems now that make those look like very archaic devices indeed. But we had an opportunity. We saw it. We jumped at it. We did get a lot of lessons learned from it. And that's actually what our first paper was written about is, you know, the process in which we tried to do a scientific analysis on studying UAP. The do's, the don'ts, lessons learned, the equipment, what was wrong with this, what was wrong with that, and basically in detail about it all. And the anomalies that we had and the explanations for those anomalies. And matter of fact, a lot of our results, unfortunately, have been behind paywalls because the presentations were like at SEU conference or the uh, other conferences for companies or for other nonprofits and other organizations that are doing serious science in this. And um, to remedy that, actually, we're going to have a 2 hour uh, UAPx special on my podcast, and Matthew is actually going to go over the entire presentation. We're going to take the best of all the presentations and kind of combine them into one, and Matthew's going to present it just like we would at SEU. So you're going to get all of the details that you want and a lot of the stuff that you don't understand. Because I know I don't understand it all. That's why I work with physicists. you know, yeah. So it was something. It was a brainchild I had because obviously you understand the need for coming up with content and things that you want to. But and it's like there's always something been nagging at me, and it's like it's so much information just to throw out there. So the format's just it melded perfect in my head. I'm like, why don't we just do a UAPX special? So and that's going to be coming up. And then, of course, throughout the time, a lot of our fellow UFO podcasters, and mine's not really a UFO podcast, but we do cover a lot of it because of UAPX. But a lot of them aren't even around anymore. There's only like a handful now. I mean, I used to be able to hop on any night of the week, go on YouTube, hit live, and find 5 UFO podcasts to hop on and start chatting with people. And now it's like you're not live, and most and all the live podcasters are get mixed up in real life again, and or at weird hours. Like I love Amy to death, but she's so early in the morning, and I try to catch it when I can, but and of course the Cross the Pond podcasters, and Dave Scott's so late for me because I'm East Coast, and you being 4 hours ahead of me, I'm sure it's really at a weird hour that he's on. So yeah, 4 a.m. Let's wake up to watch Dave's program, and I love his program. He's actually the inspiration that I wanted to kind of replicate and do as my platform, because it's something I wanted to do myself. I wanted to talk about the things that I cared about and stuff, and the way he brings guests on and just kind of listens to what they have to say and lets the flow of the conversation run. And I was very he taught me a lot without just by watching him.
Nah, absolutely. He's a legend. Absolutely. Well, listen, Gary, I mean, please tell us what the name of your podcast is, and I will make sure that everything we've talked about in the video today, there's links in the description, a tear in the sky, so that people can see the documentary based on Catalina, where the
I,
data and the
pur-
flare
I
is
purposely
mentioned.
didn't say the name because I didn't want to
Oh,
be plugging myself on your podcast, but I did plug you on
no,
mine.
no, no. There you go.
I
No,
let
no,
the,
no.
I
I
let
want you
the,
to. This is about you, not me.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, we started a podcast called Space Oddities, and we kind of made it the premise is you know from inner space to outer space. We'll talk about everything in between. So it's sometimes we'll be talking about religion, sometimes we'll talk about UFOs, sometimes we'll talk about permaculture and growing things. It's whatever strikes our fancy and seems prevalent for the day. So it's it's going to be it's so far it's been an amazing thing. It's been very fulfilling because I get up there and talk to people, and luckily some people know me already, so we are I'm sure when you started off you didn't have 130 people just log on. We've been averaging between 100 and 130 people watching it at the time. So but I attributed just that with this. So I'm sure that a lot of them are logging off when they realize I'm not talking about UFOs that night. But no, hopefully it's entertaining enough where it'll take off to where people want to listen to it. And if they don't, we're still having a great time. So it'll be archived for someday when people are like, "Well, we don't really know anything about him." Oh well, look at this. We found his podcast. you know, yeah. Look how retarded this guy was. But I'm hoping someday it's like a time capsule where they say, "Oh, if little did he know, they were AI driven bots." But yeah, so hopefully I'm proven right in the future. But this is just my thought process and thinking about it for 20 plus years.
Yeah, well, that's it, man. 20 years, but man, it's so appreciated. I think it's great to see that you've remained active in the community and and still clearly willing to talk about it. And I think that means a lot because I've still got people coming to me who are new to the subject, whether it's family, friends, or people contacting me on social media. It's still
Well,
happening.
I'm most active on X, and I mean, I have a Facebook, but unless I know you personally or I've known you for a long time and have developed a good relationship with you, basically my litmus is for my Facebook is, do I feel comfortable with this person seeing my child
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm almost the same as that. Yeah.
or having the information that's good enough to get to my home? Those are the things that I think about with my Facebook, because that's really, Facebook's a dying platform anyways. It's just for us old Gen Xers, and and immediately after us. But it's where I keep my military buddies, close friends, family, stuff like that. So yes, you can talk to me on Messenger. I'll always let anybody talk to me on Messenger, but I don't accept people on Facebook proper. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, I'm on just about everything else. Everything else, feel free to bother me all day long. We even have a Discord server that I hop on from time to time, but it's mostly dead now because I'm getting so busy. But we have people that are still on there at most hours of the night and day. But yeah, so I'll probably keep the Discord server around no matter what happens. One thing is in the future, I'm hoping to reach out to other organizations that, well, I've already started to reach out to other organizations that are serious in the science of UAPs, and um, we're all kind of feeling things out and looking what it would look like to see maybe some organizations combining to make things happen in a more of a efficient process rather than everybody trying to keep putting their hands in the candy jar. Um, but we'll see. So I'll be honest, I'm getting a little weary of running things. It gets tiring having too many hats on, especially when you're only doing everything just well enough. Not outstanding, not tremendous, but just well enough to keep things going as is. And so, and we've had some great people in the past, but unfortunate situations, would take them, or something would happen that would prove to that they just were not the good fit. And but we hope that we can start including some people in the future that are able to move the company further and higher than I ever could. Because I mean, anybody that knows me knows that my family's first. I'm a devoted husband and father, and my household, my family, come before anything. And I'd let UAPx burn to the ground before I'd let anything happen to my family. So, and that takes its toll because I'm very busy in the church, and it's like I do a lot of volunteering with my daughter's school, and so it keeps me very busy. And when I'm currently fully retired, so when you're an able-bodied person for the most part, and you could still drive, and everybody, yeah, my kid's sick, can you pick him up from school, I'm at work, hey, can I drop my kid off, he's suspended for 3 days. Yeah, it just, the phone calls never end. So I get real wrapped up with family, and and those of you that do know me personally and are on my personal stuff know about our late, we just kind of had a family tragedy, and so I've been really focused on that and trying to help my mom out through her hard times and help my family out. And it takes a lot of time up. And I didn't think that that's very fair. So I've been looking to bring more people in to help me with the administrative side. And, even if I, step down and just be on the board at some point, I'm perfectly fine with that. I still want to be a part of everything, but uh, I haven't I got some ideas. I've been talking to some people, but we'll see what ends up shaking out. But either way, I want the company to continue to grow, and I want the idea to continue to run. But I have zero hubris in this. So whatever it looks like, as long as it moves forward, I'm happy with it. So
I hear you, man. I appreciate that. I really do. Well, listen, Gary, thank you so much for taking some time to spend it with me here tonight. Really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best in the future. And to everybody watching, please go and hit all the links in the description and show your support to Gary. But for now, Gary, once again, thank you, brother.
yeah, I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on. I know it's a yesterday story, so I appreciate it. So take it easy, brother.
You too, man. Speak soon. Take care. Goodbye.